Hi everyone. With what's been happening in Lebanon, and as a Lebanese Canadian, and as a person who's been also watching social media and listening to influencers and other people explain and certain things that are being shared and reshared, and even experts on more traditional media outlets. Think about the definition of imperialism for a second, maybe as we start doing this. Imperialism is when you extend your power and your domination by either direct territorial control or by, I don't know, gaining political and economic control one way or another. On an entity, on an area specifically. So when we talk about imperialism, and we do talk about American imperialism, which is something we need to talk about, we also need to talk about Iranian imperialism, especially Iranian imperialism in Lebanon. So what I want to do is cover kind of a little bit of that. If we think back at the formation of Hezbollah in the early 1980s, it was formed not as a Lebanese entity. It was actually formed by a few Lebanese Iranians, but mostly the power and the force that was used and the manpower at that time came from the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. So it was the IRGC from Iran itself. And what was really interesting, and if you look at the history of Hezbollah throughout, you see that there's been sort of this work that's being done, that has been done by Hezbollah to mold, especially the Lebanese Shia group, into more of an Iranian Islamic Shia perspective. So the Ashura celebrations have changed over the years. And we know this from people, from Shiites themselves who are Lebanese Shiites and who've come out and kind of discussed what it means and what has been happening to their community. And so the allegiance is more towards Iran. It's more towards the Iranian leadership. It's more towards the Iranian religious entities, and more centralized system where didn't used to be that much of a centralized system. And those who opposed it got sidelined or disappeared or assassinated. In the schools, there are ways of teaching that in some schools, Hezbollah schools specifically, in their stronghold, and they teach a lot more the Iranian history than they do the Lebanese history. Or when they teach a Lebanese history, it's very much from a perspective that is not inclusive, or that does not really reflect the actual Lebanese history, sort of a rewriting of the history. But that these links with Iran are always, put forth as the primary driver, if you would like, a much above and beyond what Lebanon is. So allegiance is not necessarily to the Lebanese state and Lebanon in and of itself, or alone, depending on where we are. It could be Lebanon, but also a lot of allegiance towards Iran. They hold significant power in the government, even though there are a few MPs, members of parliament, not that many, but the power that they hold. And I'd done a previous reel talking about how we got to this point with Hafiz al-Assad and Bashar al-Assad, the two previous presidents of Syria. Looking at the power in government, they hold significant power in government, and they can actually limit a lot of the changes that are required. So de facto, there's significant power. There's domination over what was considered to be the liberation of the south of Lebanon. Even Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, admitted that they assassinated and put aside several people who themselves, or entities who themselves also wanted to liberate the south from the Israelis, and made it a Hezbollah liberation process. And so putting aside anybody else who wanted to get involved so that eventually they could claim success from that perspective. You add to that the fact that they bypass the government or the state in any actions they want to take against Israel, or they do it either in completely bypassing, or their leaders actually, who also are in the state, don't really respond to the rest of the state, or don't even tell people who are the rest of the members of parliament, or even the prime minister sometimes, or the president. But they do it either in consult or in direction, sort of consult with, or in direction from Iran. They have assassinated many people that have stood up against them. They have assassinated many Shia themselves who did not agree with them. They have assassinated many who have tried to limit the influence of Iran and the power of Iran within Lebanon. They have committed significant crimes in Syria at the behest of the protection of the Shia and at the behest of the protection of Bashar al-Assad and his people. And again, at the behest and the demand or the consult with Iran. We have Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps in Lebanon doing the fighting with Hezbollah, not ones that were requested by the Lebanese government, not ones that were invited in any way, shape, or form by the Lebanese government as an official entity. The Iranian ambassador never really submitted his papers, so it's not really an official ambassador. They don't really follow the rules. Iran doesn't really follow the rules within Lebanon and imposes its power in a specific way. Iran wants to negotiate on the part of the Lebanese government and on behalf of Hezbollah as well, even though Iran does not represent Lebanon and it should not be representing Lebanon as a whole. Hezbollah has its own jails within its area, therefore bypassing the state. Hezbollah has its own economic and other institutional systems and structures that bypass anything that's official within Lebanon itself. They bypass laws. They don't assume that laws apply to them. They protect Iranian interests within Lebanon before they protect Lebanese interests within Lebanon. They have not allowed the government, along with Hafiz al-Assad and Bashar al-Assad, have not allowed the government or the state or the army to actually extend properly into southern Lebanon. And again, that's easy to do, especially when they're in control of the government in many ways, de facto with their allies or with the de facto power that they have over the government. Did they have molded the government and the army into being what they are right now? So when people say, where's the state? Or Hezbollah says, well, who's going to protect you? The state is not there to protect you. It's because they actively undermined the state to get to this point. And they say, well, the armies can't do anything. They actively undermined the army to get to this state, to this situation, including having people within or who used to belong to Hezbollah being part of the military or were part of the military and actively undermining the power of the military from within. Not allowing the state or the government to even go into the areas that they consider to be their strongholds, and even not allowing selfies, people taking selfies or dismantling cameras in the areas that they are at, except, again, the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. They engage in activities based on what they assume or want to be right without, again, checking in with the government, but in alliance or working with or in response to requests being put forth by the Iranians themselves. When you look at all of this, you cannot not come to an idea, a conclusion, a belief in the fact that this is a form of imperialism. So for those of you who are anti-imperialist, be anti-imperialist to everything. You could be anti-imperialist to the Americans. We all know how the Americans behave around the world. And so do the Russians and so forth. But you would also have to be anti-Iranian imperialist as well, because they are behaving as imperialists in many ways, and in many shapes and in many forms. And a few other things that I do want to point to or raise. For those people who are sharing reels about how Hezbollah was formed in early 1980s, but Israel's been bombing Lebanon and has been invading its airspace and causing a sort of more or less a decline in its sovereignty even before Hezbollah was created. Absolutely. But what you're missing yes, potentially, and we've heard this, not potentially, but we've heard this from various Israeli officials. There's an interest of expansion of territory and so forth. We don't need to rehash this. It's in the open. But one thing that's really important to note is where you start your analysis matters. So if you just say that before Hezbollah was created, Israel was also bombing Lebanon, then you'd have to say why. And so if we go back to when Israel was created and there was very little activity on the border from Lebanon towards Israel, there was very little reaction from Israel. When the Palestinian Liberation Organization, through the Cairo Accord, was allowed to bombard Israel from Lebanon with no right of the state to react to that or to stop the Palestinians from doing so, that's when the bombardment started to increase. And then you add the issue of Hezbollah being formed, and then you add the rest of the equation. The other thing that we have to keep in mind as well when we're doing this analysis is when Israel invaded the south of Lebanon, there were a lot of Shia who were relieved, to say the least, because what they then understood is that Israel was there to also protect them from the Palestinians, the militias, who were causing havoc and who were hurting the Shia. And so there were Shia who were throwing rice, which is sort of like a celebratory thankfulness type of reaction or event the Lebanese or other Arabs use. They were throwing rice at the Israelis when they came in. Others as well. But the Shia were part of these groups as well. And the Shia were also members of the South Lebanese army that was established to maintain peace when Israel was partly in the south or before even Israel came in, but then really was supported by Israel. And the SLA was there to sort of replace the Lebanese army, but it was a de facto militia that was supported by the Israelis. And Shiites were member of that army. And at the same time, they were also members of Hezbollah and other military or militia type organizations. So the history is not as clean as some people make it out to be. And the history is, I would say, more or less indicative of not an uprising of the Lebanese people per se. There are many Lebanese who are part of Hezbollah, but it's also very much a history of the indicative of or an indication of Iranian imperialism in Lebanon and the way that the Iranians are sort of taking over. And while the majority of the Lebanese people do not support Hezbollah, and we have to be clear on that. The majority of the people do not support Hezbollah. Hezbollah has dragged these people into actions, events, consequences that do not represent them or that they didn't even have a say in, but more so that Iran had a say in. So maybe we should reconsider how we understand history, and maybe we should reconsider at what point of history we start our analysis and have sort of a more complete assessment and understanding. And again, this is not to undermine or erase or negate or minimize any of the horrific actions that Israel has taken against Lebanon or against Lebanese people or even the Americans. That's not the objective of this. The objective of this is to have people understand the nuances and to think before they start sharing information that is at the least misinformed and picky and the worst propaganda to cover up very negative and problematic situations and issues and groups. I hope this helps.